Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight on our introduction, our basics of a capital campaign. We offer these webinars every once in a while and have people join us live so you can ask questions that apply to your church's situation. But there's a lot that all campaigns have in common, and I will cover those steps as well. So do please ask your questions as they come up. My name is Leslie Pendleton. I am the Associate Program Director for Capital Campaigns for ECF. Half-time. The other half-time I'm in the field with clients as a consultant. So I get the honor and privilege to work with our own consultants in the field as well as many churches across the country. A short word about ECF. ECF's own mission is to strengthen the leadership and financial capabilities of Episcopal congregations, all Episcopal entities, really schools, churches, dioceses, and communities of faith to pursue their mission and ministry. We are a lay-led nonprofit, independent. We have our own lay board and foundation president. We do not answer to general convention, and we are out there to be at your service. So do call us with anything that you might need. In the areas of leadership, you may be familiar with ECF VP, Vital Practices. So it's ecfvp.org. And I recommend that you go and look at that website if you're not familiar with it, because there are tremendous resources and links and stories and templates that could help you, your vestry, anything that you're doing, really, you name it, it's there, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. Today, I'm going to talk to you about primarily capital campaigns and capital giving. There are three resources to fund mission and ministry as we know it in the church. We have your annual stewardship program. Typically in the fall, this is annual giving. While we're trying to encourage churches to look at the entire year to talk about stewardship, we've sort of gotten in a rut of that awful, it's that time of, it's like going to the dentist or something, that it's fall again and we have to do our annual giving and ask for money to meet our budget. We're really trying to get churches to look at that in a different way, really look at it year-round, talk about the benefits and the spirituality of stewardship year-round. Capital giving, of course, is extraordinary giving, something you do not every year. This is the driveway or the roof on your own house as compared to the electricity. And planned giving is another area that we work in. And if you do a capital campaign with ECF at least, we will work on your annual stewardship as well as making sure that you have a functional, structural planned giving program in place with gift acceptance policies. So some of you may be a little bit like the people in this cartoon here. Are we ready for a capital campaign? The elephant in the room. Maybe you've put it off as long as possible, you've been dreading doing it, and you really can't ignore it any longer. Hopefully at the end of tonight you'll realize there's nothing to fear, and in fact you are losing out on a great opportunity if you are putting off discussing or embarking on a capital campaign. The side effects can be transformative, I promise you. The fundraising process. At ECF anyway, and with church fundraising, the invisible parts, and really with all fundraising, are the most important part of the process. When we think capital campaign or even stewardship or annual stewardship, immediately people think pledge card and asking for money and who wants to do that. So we're going to talk about how that's not really the case if you are doing the least visible parts correctly. That's identifying the need, engaging with potential donors and finding out where their interests lie, sharing and communicating a vision, finding a common vision, asking for support, saying thank you, and continuing the process. And saying thank you is something that we never do and we can never say enough. A successful capital campaign, and this is really for any capital campaign. ECF just happens to, with their methodology, break it out into 3 separate phases. But I would say that this is true for any capital campaign, that you need discernment, you need a period of study, and then you move into solicitation, where you're actually asking people to give to a cause or to a project that they already know about. And that is the key to discernment and the feasibility study. I'm going to talk mostly about discernment tonight because it is the wiggly part, but it is the foundation for everything you're going to do throughout the rest of the campaign. So the first thing that discernment asks, and this might be before you're working with a consultant, it might be before you even have a capital campaign project. And it's a question we should be asking over and over and over again, is what is God calling your church to do or be? Have you created ownership and involvement in your congregation about who you are, about the church's identity? And have you identified needs that are keeping you? What's keeping you from doing what the church is really set up to do at this point? You want to involve, obviously, at all times, your leaders, stakeholders, visionaries. The end of a campaign is not the time to go and talk to the person who has always wanted a new parish hall and is maybe living in the town next door and can't come out to church anymore. Don't wait. Go and ask people what they think, what they want to do, what really moves them. This is creating the ownership and involvement. Identify the needs. So what is the campaign for? We are never raising money for bricks and mortar. Your capital campaign is never saying, you know, we've got debt, our building is crumbling, will you give us money? It is explaining why it is important to have a non-leaking roof over your head, or a new building, or seed money for a new program. Endowments, you can have successful campaigns for endowments because you're linking them to the future, where if you wanted to endow enough money for an assistant moving forward, that would be a reason to do that. And certainly debt retirement falls into that as well. If you retire the debt and you get rid of that monthly load on your annual, it leaves more resources for mission and ministry. Somebody is talking about getting slides after the presentation for this presentation. Normally those are emailed to you. The person who used to do all of our webinar things has left, and we're breaking in somebody new. So you should have received copies of the slides if you registered for this. If not, you are going to be mailed a copy of this webinar, a recording with the slides. And also, all of these webinars are archived on ecfvp.org, with slides as well, so you can get them there. So back to discernment, connecting this to your mission, these buildings. What are you called to do, and how will these projects help you do it better? or more faithfully. This is where the excitement can happen. If you are worried about crumbling stone, if you're distracted by a leaking roof, if you really have a rundown area for kids or new families, what is that saying about who you are, about welcoming those new families and saying, here we are, we're proud to be here, we're serving God, join us. So always connect it to your mission. If it is a new soup kitchen or new carpeting in the kids' playroom, it still works out the same way. Again, involve the leaders, stakeholders. The way we do this typically is you would form a committee to work as the engagers, really, with the congregation. Most often, we like to break people into small groups or do cottage meetings. This is where those small voices are able to be heard. All parish meetings, group parish meetings, and forums can be very intimidating for people who don't like to speak in a large group or don't feel that their idea would be well met. In small groups with a specific question to focus on, people experience, first of all, a time of fellowship with people maybe they don't know very well from the congregation, but really are able to share their own experiences that they've had at church, what it is they love about the church, and what their own dreams and hopes and ideas are. The worst thing we can do is shut people out at this phase because often people have fabulous ideas. And they're not usually the big money ideas, but they're sort of that V8 moment where we think, wow, I'm sure glad we asked the question because we wouldn't have thought of this. Communicating the vision, very important. I used to hate the word, as the wife of an Episcopal priest, the word communications can be used as a bullet almost, or a dig. You know, I didn't hear it, it wasn't communicated. And as I've done this work, I've realized how difficult it really is to communicate clearly. There's so much interference in our lives with fighting for our ears ears, really, and our attention, that we have to communicate over and over and over again. Invite people. Invite them again. Do it in as many ways that we can. If it's your website, if it's your e-newsletter, announcements on Sunday, kids acting it out in a play, whatever it is, you cannot over-communicate. And what we're doing is inviting people into that. So we're communicating as well as listening, inviting people's reaction to proposed plans, sharing costs, real costs of these plans, and really explaining why and why now. And maybe you've put it off for a while, but ongoing communication throughout discernment, but also all three phases. Once you have communicated, listened, gathered your projects together, gathered your costs, have a really good feel that the congregation is ready to move forward, it's time for a feasibility study. This is a very different feel for a campaign. It's very straightforward. It's making appointments. It's survey questions. But you will write up the proposed plan, what I call the test balloon. And it is all of the projects, all of the foreseeable costs explained clearly, and would be accompanied by a survey. You want to measure, first of all, are people aware that this is going on? Number one, have we done a good job communicating? And number two, is this an attainable goal? And if not, what is an attainable goal? If you have a list of projects, this is also a place where you can have prioritizing, where you will see what is important to the congregation. And people get very practical, I would say. A lot of buildings and grounds committees and vestries get very upset at this point saying, well, what if the congregation wants to go ahead with this frivolous thing before fixing the boiler? It doesn't work that way. People know that the structure is important, that you're not going to have anything to build on if the things that are in the most disrepair are not fixed first. So don't let that stop you. You will then be able to prioritize your projects according to how much money you can raise. I want to say here, it is very important for a church capital campaign for the leadership to put forth an attainable goal. If you had, let's say you had $1 million worth of projects that you wanted to do, and your feasibility study came back and said you can raise $750,000. And you decided, well, you know what do they know? We need $1 million, let's go ahead with it. You raise $750,000, you have a failed campaign, because now you have to take some things off the table, things that other people were going to donate to because they were their pet projects. And now they're going to get taken off the table. Now you have a situation that does not look transparent. It looks like something was planned from the beginning, and it looks like people weren't stepping up when in fact they really were. $750,000 is a terrible failure. That's a lot of money to have to call a failure and perhaps stick in your parish's DNA for decades to come. So be very careful about what you say you are going to do, or the information you get from a feasibility study, and how that informs how you're going to go forward with a campaign. Our feasibility study is a 3-month process. We interview a percentage of people in the parish, depending on the number of pledgers that you have, the number of people in the pews, that sort of thing. We do not interview the whole congregation. We do, however, survey the whole congregation. So we do a combination of personal interviews, and then everyone in the congregation is asked to participate in the same survey, the same questions, the same case statement. And all of those results are then compiled, analyzed, and reported back to you. 92% of our clients meet or exceed the goal that we recommend, and we do come back with an amount that we recommend be your campaign goal. I'm still surprised, campaign after campaign, how close that goal is to reality, give or take 10% here and there. So it really is, if the feasibility study is done right, and we've done our work in discernment, you can really get very close to knowing what your campaign goal is going to be. I just want to remind you, if you have any questions as we're going along, either with discernment or feasibility study now, please type them in the chat box, and I will answer them as I see them, or at the end of the presentation. But please add your questions. The final phase, and honestly the easiest and the most fun, is the actual solicitation and asking for pledges. When I tell churches this at the beginning, when they're at the beginning, I just think they think I'm full of it. That just can't be. That's not true. But honestly, it is. You've laid the foundation of including people and having people's feedback and building excitement about what could be. You've tested it, you've given people another chance for detailed feedback through a feasibility study, and now you're inviting them to be a part of this project. And that is the word that I challenge you to think of instead of asking for pledges or asking for money. It is an invitation. We are all attending a church that we love. I, as the parishioner, am coming and talking to a fellow parishioner about a project that I'm excited about, and I get to share why I'm excited about that. And I get to hear the story of the person that I may be meeting for the first time, or I've sat next to for years but have never really talked about pledging or money or projects. And we find a new area of commonality and spirituality shared there. So I wish you could all be in my shoes when I get to hear the stories of people who have agreed to call on people and how rewarding it was in the end. So this process is 4 to 6 months, really 4 months, 2 months of cleanup. Really the major effort happens over 4 months. We supply you with the whole working of that is supplying the preparation, planning, materials, development, and leadership recruitment. So we're developing the brochure, really your final case statement, which is saying why this is going to be a great thing for the church. It's in full color. It has your pictures, it has your goal, and your exact projects. I liken your capital campaign brochure to a covenant with the donor, that you are saying in your brochure that if we raise this amount of money, we are doing these projects. Not we're hoping to do these projects, or we're hoping we don't run out of money doing these projects. Your projects are so well researched and so positive that you are able to say, if we raise this money, we can do these things. We do this as a typical campaign really across the board. This is just general. There's a first phase. Sometimes it's called the silent phase. We call it an advance gifts phase, where you go to people who have identified themselves as lead givers or are able to make a large lead gift, and all of your leadership, which I mean to be vestry, campaign committee, buildings and grounds committee. If you had special committees that were involved with the campaign or the project planning, you want their gifts first, as well as those larger gifts, so that when you get to the kickoff event, and this is sort of the culmination and the exciting piece of really the launch, but so much work has been done before the launch that it's really the frosting on the cake, where the rest of the congregation, and if there's any public phase to it, this is when it's launched and everyone is invited to put you over the top. People tend to think, well, if you announce that you've reached 75% of your goal, aren't the people who haven't participated yet going to say, well, you don't need me, you're almost there? It's the exact opposite. People realize you do need them. You do need all the people in your congregation to help you reach this goal. And that is the signal, and often that's when people say, I want to do it. I want to get on the train. The train is leaving the station. Your naysayers will now say, oh, wow, it really looks like we're going to pull this off. I guess I can safely participate now. Celebration and thanks, very, very important. Very important. I just did a campaign training this past week of gift workers. We call gift workers, or people who are going to visit people to ask for pledges. And totally lost my train of thought. let me skip that. I'm going to go now to the professional campaign materials. This is what a brochure, a typical brochure would look like. You have a prayer, a campaign prayer. We encourage throughout all of the process to make sure you keep a spiritual emphasis. It's very easy to get distracted by the numbers and the contractors and the dump trucks and all. A campaign prayer and really somebody in charge of reminding us what we're doing this for is very important at this point especially. There's also a gifts chart. If you see on the lower right, it's a little bit hard to see here. And that's pretty standard where you're saying what number of people do you need to give at what level. And this is figured out according to the number of people, active givers in your church, as well as your feasibility study. So somebody's asked, what percentage do you aim to raise in the advanced gift phase? 60 to 80%, I think, is a safe, it's a wide-ranging percentage, I know. But somewhere over 50%, you definitely want to be over 50%. You want to be almost there. So if you can get to 75% or 80%, that's great. It really at that point depends on the size of your church and how that works out with your consultant. But that's a rule of thumb. I mentioned earlier before we got started this great book. It's a little book, and I would get it for your vestries, to have around the church. Clergy, if you want to quote out of this, it's a fabulous little book, and this is just one of the quotes that I love. Henry Nouwen says, people have such a need for friendship and for community that fundraising has to be community building. I wonder how many churches and charitable organizations realize that community is one of the greatest gifts they have to offer. If we ask for money, it means we offer a new way of belonging. And I've seen that. It is absolutely true. Again, an invitation. A plea again for questions. I'm going to be wrapping up the talking part of this, so if you get your questions ready, we can continue on. The big question, do you need a consultant? Often at this point there is so much anxiety around the vestry table, buildings and grounds, looking at your annual budgets and all. And now people say, really, do we really have money to spend on a consultant when it could just go toward our building projects? If it's not ECF, and it certainly does not have to be ECF, I recommend getting someone. I think it is almost a cruel thing to do to active lay leader volunteers to have them be in charge of a capital campaign. It is a lot to ask, even if they're not asking it and volunteering to do it. We are keeping volunteers accountable for tasks they've agreed to. We can hold up the mirror. We can push back and say, you know, it would be really a lot easier to do it the way you're saying, but it's not going to pay off. In the end, what you raise will cover your consultant fees. You can research that through lots of different surveys and all of that. But when you want to give up, when you've gotten to that 75% of your goal and you're like, wow, you know, that's great, that's more than we thought we could get, we're done, we will continue to push you. We will do more campaigns than any clergy person will certainly do in their career lifetimes. We will do more in probably a year or two. Accountability, again, is there, timeliness. Adherence to ethical standards, which is, this is a tricky ground. We're trying to keep you spiritually grounded, but also raise money. And there's some advice and some processes that really need to be in place to make this, again, a positive experience and not something that's going to drag you down for years. The other thing is you can always fire your consultant. You can't fire your volunteers, at least not very easily, and it's not very pleasant. So please do think about that, even if you're one of the people who is a fundraiser and would like to do this for your church. I would hate for you to get to the end of a successful campaign and say, you know what, I know too much. I don't want to be a member here anymore. I laugh with my husband because I say it's really interesting. My clients and people in congregations can say all sorts of things to me, and it never gets under my skin. But in my own parish, that's very different. So I think you know what I'm talking about. Should your campaign be 1, 2, or 3 years? Before 2008, I think there was pretty much a choice of whether you were going to do a 3 or a 5-year campaign. You'd hear a lot about that. Oh, is it a 3 or a 5-year? Since 2008, I have done no 5-year campaigns. And I don't know if it has to do with the economic downturn as much as the mobility of our culture and people moving on or having the need to really get projects done. I would say right now churches are doing 3-year campaigns. If it doesn't complete everything they need to do, they take a year off or so and launch another 3-year campaign if it's a big ongoing project. There's a question here about recovering from a failed campaign about 10 years ago. And this is going to exactly what I was talking about. I have worked with parishes where they wouldn't even say they had a failed campaign. I've asked and I can't figure out why there's such animosity and bad feelings about a campaign that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. One client, it was merely that they overspent on one project and another project wasn't able to be completed. Excuse me. And this is why I'm so adamant about that promise in the brochure. Nobody ran off with the money. Things were completed that they said were going to be completed, but not exactly the way they had hoped. The best way to recover, and honestly the only way that I've seen truly recovers, is prove that it can be done correctly. And that's what happened with the client I'm talking about. We had resistance through discernment. We had resistance through feasibility study. By the time we got to asking for pledges, people were smiling and relieved and reassured that this was completely transparent because they had been communicated with, that it was very different than the last campaign, and this was going to be the campaign in their closest history. So doing a campaign successfully and correctly, I think, is the only way to recover from that. Typical consulting fees. This is a really difficult question. One thing I can say is if a consultant is saying to you, we will not charge you anything, but we will take a certain percentage of your campaign funds raised, that is unethical. That is something not many people know, but that is not considered an ethical fee for professional services and fundraising. ECF, and I can only speak for how we set our fees, we do our fees on a sliding scale according to your parish size, budget, pledge units, ASA, all of those things are taken into consideration, and we we come up with a proposal for fees for all three phases. They're three separate contracts, so they are three separate fees and payment scales at that point. If you want to know, we do a free on-site presentation with a full proposal with the fees included. So if you are thinking about this, and I think you should interview more than one, certainly, consultant, if not three. The problem there is comparing apples and oranges. There really is a lot of variation on what is delivered, what materials you're going to get, what is included in that fee. So just to listen on the phone to three different consulting firms say this is what the cost is, you really want to look at what exactly you're getting for that fee. There's a question here. We are a small parish, annual pledging $80,000. We're looking at roofing projects, which I think is a small amount for us to raise. Do we need to do the full process to get there? This, I would say no. This is not a capital campaign. When you are looking at a capital campaign, you're really thinking in terms of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times your annual pledging. To do a roof or to do a boiler or air conditioning system, something like that, that's really a fundraising event. And you can go straight to communicating that you've gotten the right quotes, that you're trying to put on a new roof, that sort of thing, and raise that money. And you'll probably raise it fairly easily. The problem here is if you do this with all of your capital projects, you're going to burn out your people, your donors, and say, well, what is it going to be next year? Didn't we just put the roof on? So that's sometimes, if you've had a row or a series of these fundraising projects, you do worry about donor burnout, and you can't really concentrate on your mission, on your annual funding, on the excitement of what we're doing. It just seems like one disaster after another. So it may be something where you know you have to do the roof. You want to open this up to the congregation to say, what else should we be looking at this point while we're doing this? Something that might be more fun than a roof. People know we have to do the roof. What else is it that we could do that would get people excited? So you do want to make sure you've thought that through. How does a capital campaign affect a church's annual stewardship? This is always a fear and a great question. We find that a capital campaign done well, and if you think about this, it makes sense. You have gathered the congregation around a common vision. Maybe you've shed some dead wood, some projects, some areas of ministry that have gone through their useful lifetime, celebrated it and said, thank you, it was great, and put that to rest. And now you're concentrating on what your people have the energy and desire and call from God, honestly, to do. That in itself engages people in the life of your church. You raise the money for these projects that were presented through a capital campaign, and another thing happens. People realize that they can actually stretch a little bit more annually for something they care about and something they're involved in. So we often will do what we call a dual campaign, where you're talking about your annual pledge card and your capital campaign pledge card at the same time. We'll sometimes do an insert to explain your annual ministries and where percentage-wise funding is going, to talk to people about your annual needs. And then you're able to talk about the capital campaign. So it really is a nice all-around stewardship baptism, for lack of a better word. Anyway, so ECF, why ECF? So this is our little ECF plug. We have knowledge of the Episcopal Church. We work with consultants throughout the country. We have about 12, 15 consultants, I think, around the country right now. And we all get back and share what's going on out there. And we have had to adapt and change as the church and you all are having to adapt and change with the times. I talked about the sliding scale, and we do approach this spiritually. We have to keep that in mind. Yes, we want to raise the funding and the resources necessary for you to move on with your mission and ministry. That is the whole point. Somebody has a question about how to involve corporations or local vendors. Yes, this is always a sticky question. It's an obvious question, and I wish I could tell you that corporations and your local community comes to the rescue on a regular basis with churches. It's just not true. You have to, you all, and this is true of the most adorable, beloved, historic church on the green that everyone adores. It could be on every postcard that promotes the town itself. The people who are worshiping inside the church are the ones expected to keep it up and going and care about it. You may get some donations, but they are not going to make or break your campaign. So we always want to invite people into that. If, this is the if, unless you have a major civic service going on in your church. If you have a food or a soup kitchen that is being run by a separate 501c3 that has its own donors, and you need to put something in that soup kitchen, you may be able to get funding. You may be able to get city, state funding for that, corporate funding, or even outside donors. But it's a tough haul. And there are grants out there. We do not do the grant writing. It's most likely connected by somebody in your congregation. There are grants out there, not a ton of them. There's a lot of people vying for that money. But if you have the case and you have the support, often, I'm working with a client now who needs their feasibility study in order to apply for a matching grant to show that the congregation has skin in the game and that they're really serious about keeping up the this ministry. Nick is telling me the resource library link is broken. You know what? Well, Okay, well, if you go into Capital Campaign, this is also episcopalfoundation.org is the ECF website. ECFBP.org is our leadership resources website. If you just go into the episcopalfoundation.org and click on programs, I think, you can find Capital Campaign and all of these materials. Sorry about that. I will have to redo this link. Oh, it's not. Okay, so Nick has written it's episcopalfoundation.org/program/capital campaigns. He put it in your chat right there. Is the link, the new link for resources. I have to update my slides. What does a consultant offer? So I think I covered this a little bit. If there's something more specific, we are there to. A lot of it is cheerleading. A lot of it is reassuring. A lot of it is the person to bounce things off of. How should we approach this person? Should we do something this way or that way? Is it wrong to think we're going to raise half of our money from outside sources? Can we leave a whole lot of time between our feasibility study and our ask? Well, that's not a great idea. You want to keep the momentum going. So I'm sorry, I'm reading what Nick has written. The ECFVP link I posted is for the archived webinars that someone asked for. So those are the archives. Yeah, the capital campaign resources, if you go to episcopalfoundation.org, you'll find that. There's some, I think even the picture here, the resources are linked on the right. The slides, yes, will be attached to the recording when you receive it, which will go out probably next week when we get everything taped and edited and stuck together and sent out to everyone. Any other questions? I'm trying to think of some of the, there's a question here. What if you have the funds to execute part of the phases now, but you're not even to feasibility study yet? Do you break ground? Great question. In fundraising, we often say, a colleague of mine has said this before, she says, the day the bulldozer pulls away, you better have raised all of your money. Think about it. If you've finished the work, if you've done all the work, I guess we don't really need the money. We found it somewhere. People have to see the need, and they have to know that their investment, that they're being invested in this project makes a difference. There's a difference between that and a bridge loan, or you're in the midst of a campaign, or you're in the midst of the 3 years where people are paying out the money, and you've taken a loan, but that loan has to be paid back as the money comes in. If you are not to feasibility study, the question is here, if you are not even to feasibility study yet, do you break ground? That's a pretty hard question to answer without knowing some of it. If you have funds already saved or you've been building up to this point, there's something to be said for that. But I often have to say to clients, stop fixing things. They may be using their endowment. Well, we have to put the roof on. Well, we did this addition. So we want to have a campaign to basically pay for those things that we already did. It really is very, very difficult to make a case for that. You're also breaking ground and then asking people's opinion. Your feasibility study or your engagement with the congregation looks a little bit false if you already have plans. Now, if everybody has seen the plans, everybody knows you want to go forward with it, you're just not sure how much money you can raise, or your roof is leaking and it's, hurting the plaster walls. There's all sorts of emergency reasons to go ahead with that. But if it's something that people really want to give you feedback on, you shouldn't go ahead with it yet. I see a question down here. We need about $350,000 to reach our $1 million necessary in our endowment in order to begin issuing grants. We have no signature project to market. How do you recommend we sell our goal? There's our link to the future, which is sometimes hard for people to see. Again, this question would all go to how far did you go engaging your constituency? If this is grants to the outside, that's one thing. If it's grants for scholarships within your, within your church, if this is an outreach project, then that's where your light has to shine. If you have no signature project to market, then you don't have anything. Your signature project is, who are you giving grants to? What difference is it going to make in their lives? How does God fit into all of that? So again, it is how you are explaining that to people and how people feel personally engaged. Listen, it's, when you come down to it, the competition for all of our dollars is there. Our schools know how to do it. NPR knows how to do it. Hospitals know how to do it. The church really should know how to do it. I think we're afraid to do it. And what we're saying is, we've got something exciting going on here. And I want to be a part of it, and you should want to be a part of it too. Let me tell you about it. That means people have to know about it, have to believe in it, and have to engage in it. And it has to be something that moves them. If we have an existing loan, can that be rolled in as part of a new capital campaign with a larger new building project? Absolutely. Absolutely. We've done new projects, and that's an example of, do we want to do a capital campaign, or do we just want to ask people to pay down this loan? Sure. You could ask people, look, let's pay down this loan. This is what it's going to mean for our annual budget. But what's more exciting and more engaging is taking the time to make the case that, one, we can pay down our debt. It's going to free up this amount of money per year for our own annual mission and ministry. Two, we're going to put a new classroom in, or a brand new playground, or whatever it is that people have identified that is really necessary. So now it's not about that loan. It really is, again, about the future and about how exciting that could be if we could do these things together. And you might very much identify, often it's, we need to fix the organ, let's just have an organ campaign. Well, you know what? The organ is a part of that. If it's possible, what else could you do with the organ? I am going to wrap up, I think, now that I've given you this terrible false link. Hopefully this link works, henrynowen.org. You can order, and I believe download some of Spirituality of Fundraising. I'm not sure. Order the book. It's well worth it. Another great book for annual campaigns and just wrapping our minds around fundraising in the church is Not Your Parents' Offering Plate. We have to start looking at the differences in generations, generational giving. And we do have some webinars archived on the ECFVP website about that. There's a lot being written about it. Very interesting things about the millennials and the greatest generation and all that sort of thing. So if you have any questions, if you are ready to talk further and specifically about your parish and want to talk to ECF about what that would look like, please give us a call. Louise Baeto is our program director in New York. You can email her or call this number. My email is here. You can feel free to email me. We will try to be in touch and follow up with you if you're thinking about a campaign. So you may get a call from a consultant just to see if there are further questions that you have that they can answer. No pressure. We'd love to hear from you and find out what's going on out there. So thank you very much for joining us. And I hope you'll give us a call and give us a look on Vital Practices. Thanks, everyone.